Welcome to Money Convos, where we discuss personal finance and investment tips. We're committed to helping people create wealth and achieve financial freedom. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Clubhouse, and Facebook, and subscribe to our YouTube and podcast. All right then, let's head into today's conversation.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's conversation. Thank you for joining us here this beautiful midweek evening. First, let me greet my brother here, Edem. How be?
Hey, Kim, I'm good. Yourself?
I'm great, and excited about today's conversation. Right? We are all wondering. It's a question on our minds. Where is going? For some of us, those of us in the diaspora, it helps. But then again, it doesn't really help because if life gets harder in Ghana, we'll have to support more. So we hope things get better in Ghana so that we can all be fine wherever we are.
Exactly.
Or then we think we are better off.
You go see the billing, they go bill you.
I remember a certain time, and perhaps Courage will refer to us sometime. Was it December? We just finished 23. I think December 22. The Cedi had depreciated so badly. But just before Christmas, before Christmas, it recovered a bit. And that started the plans of all the buggers. Because when they thought they could spend $2,000, for example, then now they realize that no, because the Cedi has recovered a bit, they need more dollars to cover the same amount of Cedi. So maybe they now have to spend 2,500 or 3K. I remember that time. The buggers were hot. So at least if a few buggers suffer for the majority to thrive, I think we are on the side of the buggers. We will accept it. It's a sacrifice we are willing to accept. So to help us see what can make such a sacrifice happen, we have a venerable, highly esteemed Ifu Courageous to join us. Courage Boutique. Brother, welcome to Money Convos once again.
Thank you, my guy. My pleasure.
Oh, yes.
Good evening to the house. It's been a while.
Yeah, it sure has been a while. And we were hoping that things will correct, but it's like things are still remaining where they are. So we have to bring you back to explain it to us. So without much ado, I think our audience know who you are already. Maybe you can just give a quick introduction to anybody who's not heard about you before. Just a 2-3 second introduction. And then we can get into today's discussion.
Well, the name is Courage Boutique. I'm supposed to be the research lead at GCB Capital. You probably hear me a lot on some of these issues, even sometimes when I feel I talk too much. But as part of the job to try to bring elucidation to some of these things here. So I do macroeconomic research really for investment decision making at GCB Capital. I was with Melikema Data Bank at some point. In fact, we exited in the same month, actually. That's just a brief about me.
Great. Thank you for that. There was a time when we were there together, and whenever I needed some economic backing for my investment decisions, I could always hop over to the next room to go and ask Courage what he thinks, and he was always there to support me. So as we are doing Money Convos and we have personal finance decisions to make, and we need economic backing, it's Courage that will fall on. So Courage, without much ado, let's get to the crux of the matter. What's going on with the Cedi in 2024? Like, what's up? Things were going pretty okay. Then suddenly, boom, it went up. What happened?
Well, were they exactly very okay? I'm not very sure about that. So the thing is, I think the main issue is that you hear the narrative from the government, from Bank of Ghana, that we have relative stability, which is fair point to advance. But if you look at the detail, if you are a country whose currency is lost maybe a Cedi, 2 Cedi, or even more in a single year, ordinarily that should be a concern. You are in the US. I don't think you've seen more than a 50-cent drop in the value of the USD in a single year. The year that happens, that will be quite an alarming year. It would sound like the world is ending, like Bloomberg headlines and all that will be quite unbearable. But we have a situation where I think from start of 2024 till date, the Cedi has lost, more than 2 Cedi offered value since start of year. If you look at it on the retail market, you look at it on the interbank market, really. So in terms of percentages, it's looking like year-to-date depreciation 16.7, 16.8 on the interbank market, and slightly higher on the retail market, but under 20% year-to-date. If you compare to previous year around this time, where we 12 May 2023, that was nearly 22% depreciation. So if you look at it just on the percentage levels, it looks relatively better. But then the reality is that our Cedi has lost about two Cedi here compared to where we ended last year. And for me, that is alarming. And looking at the fact that somewhere end 2019, we had exchange rate just around 6 Cedi 20 pesos. And now we are talking 14, 15 Cedis, wherever you are looking at it from. I think there is a concern. This is how Bank of Ghana puts it. The reasons Bank of Ghana thinks the Cedi is under pressure are these. It said the pressure in the foreign exchange market reflected increased demand for higher imports. And I'll digest that in a bit. Energy sector payments, uncertainties around progress with debt restructuring negotiations with external creditors. These conditions, according to Bank of Ghana, fed into sentiment and contributed to additional pressures. Now, why are we talking of import? We have been in COVID since 2020 and have yet to fully recover. And so we tend a lot to probably coping strategies, domestic solutions, alternatives, and all that. We are now getting into the phase where there is a semblance of normalcy getting restored. Right after COVID was these financial issues, fiscal issues that meant macroeconomic unsustainable and all that. So things never really returned to their pre-COVID levels, but we are getting there gradually. And so you would see for this period that import growth over the first 4 months of the year is quite faster than growth in export. Yes, balance of trade is still in surplus. We still got some odd, if you like, 5 billion in export receipts and import bills slightly lower. But if you look at the growth in export versus the growth in import, the growth in export was much faster. And that is just telling you that people are returning to normalcy. The normal things people will import, like raw materials, like everything you can think about, we are getting now into full swing and getting those in plus. The exchange rate effect means that the import bill is also growing as much. And this year in particular, we've lost out on an important opportunity. Never have we thought cocoa prices could reach a $10,000, $11,000, $12,000 per ton. That we got there. And cocoa was largely 2,000, 2,500, 3,000 thereabout. Under normal circumstances. And if you realize, we sold most of our cocoa bean forward, and we had locked in prices around $2,500 per ton, and it went to 12,000 at some point. And we lost out on those windfalls that could mean that our export receipts are also matching up with the growth in import. So that imbalance there meant that there is pressure on the exchange rate. Government owes the IPPs, independent power producers, and they were threatening to shut down. So at some point, they had to do some lump sum payment. All of it had drawdowns on our reserves, or some had like CDs paid to them. And most of these IPPs, because of their foreign exposure, will quickly convert these monies. Those brought some pressures on the market. We also know about the age-old issues of contractor arrears and all that, where roads, schools, hospitals are contracted, and these contractors are being owed huge sums of money. We are in an election year. We need to clear the books so that we can look good, and then you can increase your chances of winning an election. So there are payment clearings of those arrears that are going to these contractors, and giving the exposures and all that, most of these would naturally convert some of these monies into dollars. And those are the dynamics playing out, really, which is putting the pressure. Then, of course, we know government election year history, how the record of fiscal slippages are very paramount even under program. You can talk of 2020, you can talk of 2016, you can talk of 2012, 2008. Perhaps the only exception was 2004, when under HIPIC, our fiscal deficit was on target or even fell slightly short of the target. And so that history of election year overrun is playing on the minds of everybody. And so they want to take their destinies into their own hands. And just oppose that with debt restructuring and how it dented confidence, just oppose that with the fact that there is mark-to-market losses for a lot of people, and general sentiment on the market is quite bearish, and debt restructuring, external ones are still ongoing. People are not too sure what's going to happen. So typically, what would have go into some T-bill, what would have gone into some mutual fund, what would have gone into some GOG bonds from the savings, like savings from our salaries, are now going into purchasing some FX just to take your destiny into your own hands. And these things are feeding into speculation quite rapidly on the market. I think these factors in totality are the reasons we are seeing the kind of movement of volatility we're seeing in the exchange rate. Plus the fact that, yes, reserves are improving, but Bank of Ghana has clear targets under the program, and there is a limitation on how much intervention they can make. There are quarters or segments of the market that seem to think the IMF thinks the Cedi is undervalued, and the fair value could look like 18, 19 cedis. And so they are limiting government's ability to intervene, or Bank of Ghana's ability to intervene to try to stabilize the Cedi a bit. There are also those who seem to think that Visa transactions are pricing the Cedi dollar rate at about 17.5 thereabout. And so those are the reasons or the factors fueling the speculation. So people are trying to hoard the dollars before the market hits those levels so that they can cash out. I think those are the factors driving the exchange rate to where it is now, largely on the market.
Wow. This is a tall list of things that are stacked up against us. I don't even know where to begin. But just out of curiosity, what do we have going on well for us, really?
Well, to be fair, program implementation has been generally on track. We have completed a second review of the program, at least at the staff level. There were no issues related to the quantitative performance indicators. There were no issues related to the structural benchmarks. There were no issues related to indicative targets. I think we are largely on track with those ones. The first year of program implementation saw us even perform better across most of the indicators than the IMF assumed. Growth came in at 2.9. The initial assumption was 1.5, adjusted to 2.3. We closed the year to 2.9. Impressive. Inflation was way lower than what the monetary policy consultative clause was. We ended the year with, I think, 23.2%. The lower band of that clause was about 25%. So we were better on the inflation side. Reserve covered, I think, 1.7 months of import cover at the end of the year. It was supposed to have been at 1.1. So again, we exceeded a target on that. Most of the structural reforms that we were supposed to do on the fiscal side, on the monetary side, the zero memorandum of understanding on deficit financing, all of those things are in place. So I think first year has been impressive. Second year so far, it looks like things are on course. The little concern I had was the quarter one fiscal numbers that showed some slippages. I think we recorded a primary deficit of 0.7% of GDP against a target of 0.2. Revenue fell short by as much as 7 billion in quarter one alone. They have had to adjust expenditure quite significantly to be able to even get the 0.7% of GDP thing we are talking about. I understand the expenditure is being front-loaded, and typically in quarter one, revenue doesn't tend to perform that much, but the gap is quite significant. Averagely, it's about between 4 and 5 billion shortfall. This year, we saw 7 billion shortfall in quarter one alone, which will mean that a lot of revenue intervention efforts need to be sustained for the remaining quarters to be able to make up or adjust your expenditures accordingly, what you call rationalization, to be able to meet the target. So that is one concern, and it's feeding into the election year jitters that people have in their mind, which is fueling the speculative process. So it's up to government now to show the evidence of how they can rein in expenditure and grow revenue in the second half of the year. In fact, in the second, third, and fourth quarters of the year, to ensure that some balance is restored. But quite apart from that, almost all the indicators seem to be on track. And it is up to government to demonstrate this clearly and communicate it clearly to the market and get a needed buy-in that we are doing a few things right on the reform side of things. And the IMF completing the second review as a sure vote of confidence in the progress under the program. What is holding the board level approval is not because we haven't met the target. It is because we need to sign off the MOU that we agreed in principle in January for official debt restructuring. That has been signed now, so all clear for the second review to be completed. And a third review is also pending, I believe, in September thereabout. And the expectation is that we will deal with that also quite fairly. And the completion of the second review, the completion of external debt restructuring, at least on the official side, would also set the tone for negotiations with the Eurobond holders and hopefully a completion soon, probably before this year ends. All these would have cleared the way for us to enter 2025 on a clean slate and probably with much better market sentiment than it is now. So I think there is quite a number of things, at least for now, working in our favor that we can hope to uphold and build on going forward.
Okay, at least it's good we had some positive things that at least there's a scorecard and the government is working towards that scorecard. Just quickly and out of curiosity, if we do these things, is it likely to impact the FX rate in a sense that right now we are around 14, 15 levels? Are these things gonna cause it to come back down to 12, 11 potentially?
There will be, or let me say, there possibly could be a correction. But to 12, 11, no, I don't think so. You see, the thing about price and exchange rate is also a price is that they are sticky downward. And well, if you recall, I think you were referring to in your opening comment, you were referring to the year 2022, where we saw exchange rate reach the 16 Cedi to $1 levels, but corrected towards I think 11, 9, 12 Cedi by end of year. But if you look back, it started from around 6 Cedi 80 pesos, beginning of that year, went all the way. And I remember the conversation about we are breaking the 8 with Cedi and all that. And it went all the way to 16 and corrected back to 12. But it never really got back to 8 or even the 6 we started that year with. That's the thing about pricing. For instance, now that the international market and the IMF, rightly or wrongly, seem to think that the Cedi is still undervalued, even at the current levels, that will feed into sentiment, right? And so I expect some correction ultimately once we conclude the official debt restructuring, once we make sufficient progress with the Eurobond restructuring, and the half-year review of the fiscal account show that we are broadly on track and all that. It should trigger some correction, but I don't think to the levels we started the year with. It may just be probably settling around, now we are 15 on the retail market, maybe settle around at 14, lower 14 levels, could be the normal level going forward now. I don't expect it to get to 10, 11, 12. I think we've gone past those periods or those levels.
Wow, that's just a sad reality we just have to accept, right? Okay. All right. Thank you for that. So something that usually we discuss when we talk about the economy, beyond FX rates, we also talk about inflation. What's the relationship between inflation and FX rates? Does one feed into the other?
Definitely. In fact, if you are a
They're
student
like
of
white and rice
economics,
and
you would
7
have
and
heard
8.
it. Exactly. You would have encountered this word grandeur causality, or there is a bi-causality between the two of them, right? You see, when inflation is high, it makes the domestic prices of goods produced locally also high. So you are not competitive export wise, and people tend to source import from cheaper destinations in, and that puts pressure on the exchange rate. So that is inflation causing depreciation. I don't know if you understand the transmission I just talked
Yeah.
about. Domestic prices high. I feel a bag of rice is too expensive. Ghanaian rice is too expensive. So let me import Thai rice,
Oh, okay.
which they enjoy economies of scale, so it's cheaper. But I will use FS to do so. In the process, I cause depreciation. But the reverse side is also that if you are importing a lot and bringing in, again, the pressure is on the exchange rate to cause the exchange rate to depreciate, and ultimately paying duty. The higher bill you pay for the import will mean that the price you sell it on the local market also increases, and then it triggers inflation also. So currently, for instance, just as an analogy, we've seen PURC increase utility tariff for both electricity and water. The rates are not very significant, but for the quarter two period, if you will notice, yes, crude oil prices surged to, I think, a peak of $91 per barrel at some point, but they have broadly receded back to now 82, 81%, 81, $82 per barrel levels, which was kind of the levels they were mostly in quarter one, right? But then this period, utility tariff will go up or has gone up because there are two important variables in that pricing formula. That is exchange rate and the international price of crude oil. And of course, the international price of the other fuels they use, mostly gas. Exchange rate is volatile. Crude oil is largely stable and gas prices largely stable. So that exchange rate effect means tariffs on utilities going up, and that will feed into inflation. It's the same way if I were buying CRV in 2022 was about 180, 170, 150,000 dollars. Today, CRV, same models, 2020 models
It's mean cedis.
thereabouts.
You are starting to
It's
freak me
over,
out. 180,000 cedis or dollars.
yeah, 180,000 cities.
Aha, okay, okay, okay.
180,000 cities. CRV today, same models, it's over 400,000 cities. The difference is the impact of exchange rate. And those prices will feed into inflation, and they cut across every other good. A bag of rice may not change in Thailand, but because of the exchange rate, when you bring it in, it's more costly for the importer now, and they would have to sell it at a higher price, which feeds into inflation. So those two, there is a bi-causality between the two of them. One leads to the other also leads to the other, and it passes through really. That's what we call the pass-through effect of exchange rate depreciation. So with the Cedi this volatile or this week, it is partly explaining the inflation dynamics we have. Inflation largely, and today inflation printed 23.1%. It shows a decline from 25 and the trend, but that is a year-on-year trend. We're looking at what happened last year, May, versus what happened this year, between that period from May last year all the way to now. So that's a 12-month cycle, right? But if you look at it on a month-on-month trend, you'll see that month-on-month inflation is rising and at quite a sharp rate. I think the rate was if I recall right, 3.2% or so for this month. Non-food inflation alone, which encompasses most of these hard cost stuff, is about 3.4. And food inflation is equally increasing, reflecting not only the seasonality effect, but also the impact of tomatoes that we import from Burkina, onions, and many other things we import from around us that are being affected by the exchange rate, really. So the month-on-month picture of inflation shows you the fact that exchange rate depreciation and the current bearish sentiment around is feeding into the costs of living. And that is what we must note.
Okay. All right. Wow. It's something that goes, the relationship, the way they affect each other, it's a two-way street. So it's something that we need to keep an eye on and see how we all as actors affect it. Great. So let's just briefly touch on the government policies? I know you've mentioned a few, but is there anything that the government is doing that is going to try to manage the situation for now?
Well, yes, a lot. And by government, I'll touch on maybe Bank of Ghana as well.
Okay.
If you recall, in March, Bank of Ghana increased the cash reserve ratio. For starters, cash reserve is a percentage of your total deposit you have to keep with Bank of Ghana. And it's a requirement. Bank of Ghana, aside from that, would also do open market operations to try to mop up excess liquidity when they feel inflation risk is so high. And that's because we are an inflation targeting monetary regime, and we think that monetary inflation is dominantly a monetary phenomenon. So if you can control the level of money supply, you will effectively be controlling inflation. So they increased the cash reserve ratio to 25% for banks that have their loan to deposit ratio below 55% or so. And a number of banks, in fact, it's only one bank that escaped the adjustment. The 22 out of 23 banks have been affected by that. And the indication is that most of them are drawing down now on their reserve, if they are OMO investment at Bank of Ghana, to be able to meet that. You see them drawing down on T-bills. But the intention largely was to withdraw some Cedi liquidity from the system to the Bank of Ghana at no cost. Initially, for the first 3 or so weeks, it succeeded in doing that. But currently, things have returned to normal. So Bank of Ghana would have to look for extra ways to mop up. They have to do so because if there is so much money in the system, then people are tempted to use it to demand for some FX, which will cause the pressures. People will use it to feed their demand for goods and services, and giving limited supply levels, or if supply is constant, it could mean that there is some demand pulled inflation happening thereabout and all that. So Bank of Ghana has done that. It's not yielded the exact result they intended. They have the policy tool, also policy rate tool, to also depend on. Currently, they've just cut the policy rate by just 100 basis points since start of the year. And I don't think there is the inclination to increase it because of the growth consequences. And so that, I believe, will be on hold for some time. But they have other tools that they can deploy at any time. And Bank of Ghana can define at any time what deposit is. I think they may be looking at some of these things versus what the real situation is, and they can adjust their policy position as may be required. On the government side, we need to tackle the root causes of inflation. Food is a major factor. How are we tackling that? Government response have been planting for food and job, and planting of food and job 2.0. What has changed, I'm not too sure, but the whole idea is target the production of some staples. And I believe this time around, some vegetables and all that included. The extent of the intervention and how it yields result will ultimately determine how food inflation can be impacted by this policy intervention. The thing about oil price, what do we do? The solution we all know, it's about building strategic reserves, like the US has done, and every serious major economy has done. They have so much in strategic reserves that when they are up against the market, they try to fall on those to make up demand, and when prices correct, then they can restock. In our case, we are exposed to the market, and we are quite vulnerable when things go against us. And we've seen the gold for oil intervention, which doesn't address even a quarter of the needs of the market, really. So these OMCs still depend on the market to import oil, which is why the impact on pricing is quite not so significant. And so these are some of the interventions government has put in place. Has it yielded a result? I don't necessarily think so. Are they worth probably entrenching and probably building on? I think, yes, it can be looked at. There is the consideration to cede the gold for oil policy to the commercial banks, where they can use part of their, if you like, deposits and capital to fund the importation of oil through this gold oil barter arrangement and all that, like act as the intermediaries instead of Bank of Ghana. And that will help in an extent because the banks, depending on their credit assessment, could inject a bit more as opposed to the Bank of Ghana concerned about their exposure and their current capital position and the need for them to recapitalize and all that. There is a lot going on at Bank of Ghana that this is just one other risk probably they don't want to take. So if they hive it off to banks and they find it worthy and pump some money into it, and maybe we could cover even 50-60% of our oil import from that policy, it could ease the exposure to the market a bit and help us manage pricing a bit. So these are bits and pieces of things that are going on, which I don't think are very effective in the form they are now, but probably worth looking at again to see how they can be strengthened to yield the desired results.
That's interesting. So they all have a part to play. The Bank of Ghana doing their part, and then the government of Ghana also doing their part.
Doing their bit, yeah.
And in as much as we can look internally and look at the things that we are doing, the concept of FX rate is Ghana Cedi versus US dollar. That means there are some global implications or global events that are going to be affecting us to yield whatever rate
definitely
that we are resulting in, right? So what should we be concerned about in terms of global events that could be affecting our currency?
Well, in terms of global events, they always say if the US cough, the world catches flu. So it is always useful we look at events happening in and around the US. We started the year with talk about potential soft landing. We talk about some monetary policy pivot, and that could support growth to a certain reasonable level. Labor market conditions stabilizing, improving, and all that, inflation receding. Largely, those trends have had their own headwinds so far. The FOMC met today. That is the Federal Open Market Committee, the equivalent of our MPC in Ghana here in the US. They decide to maintain their federal funds rate again within that target range. But it looks like the tonation is tilting a bit, which suggests that maybe second half of the year, US maybe, at least it looks like the market is saying probably at least one cut next in the second half of the year. If that happened, the reason it's important is this. US Treasuries 10-year benchmarks are around 4.45, 4.46 now. And that's the highest they've been in a long time. So a US investor who may be going out to Africa, in Ghana inclusive, to look for risks to take because they want higher return is looking at the exchange rate hit they might take in Ghana or any other African market, and they adjust for their exchange rate adjusted returns and look at what their real return looks like, and they see the US market gives them more, so they stay there, right? Is the reason the euro and the USD is strong? Is the reason rates are quite high there because there is appetite there as opposed to other emerging markets where the risk is quite enormous. But if US first start to pivot, interest rates start to decline, and by extension, it applies to the euro area, the European Central Bank, the Bank of Japan, and of course, most of the other major economies. If they ultimately pivot, what it will mean is that the interest rate outlook begin to dwindle in those economies, and the benchmark treasuries yields will begin to fall. And that is where risk appetite, risk on mode will begin to come back on. And these things would impact exchange rate. If you remember in the 2017, 2018, 2019 levels, years, the reasons exchange rate was quite stable was because the capital market was supportive of Ghana. We go to the Eurobond market every year to raise substantial amount, 3 billion plus, to try to manage our reserve and also support our fiscal policies and programs. Now we can't do that. Besides that, foreigners tend to come to our market a lot. So local bond issuances were highly successful, huge volumes month after month. And that was because there was huge offshore presence on the market. Now they've all gone back, and that was part of the CD pressures because the risk are enormous and rates are high in these markets when inflation surged. But once those things begin to reverse, as it's expected to happen, but probably belatedly, we may begin to see sentiment improve in the EMDs segment. Another thing is we know that there is actually a peace pact that have been kind of agreed to between I think what's the name, Israel and Hamas, and they are going through the process. I think the demand is that Hamas seem to want total withdrawal of the troops, and they've agreed to the pact that Joe Biden and his team has put together. And I think Israel also, most importantly, has agreed to that. So it looks like the Middle East situation is also probably in a matter of time will come to an end, and its impact on crude oil shipment from Europe and how it's affecting pricing and all of that will also kind of correct in a few weeks, months or so to come time. And that could also give us some leg room or some breathing space a bit. Russia, Ukraine, it's not as troubling as it was, but it's still very much a concern. The hope is that there are positive development on that side also, and then we could have a normalcy return to those markets, and by extension, the goods that we depend on those economies to get. Right. So those are some international development that are happening or will happen that we are all looking forward to. I think on policy rate side, the Eurozone is also looking at second half of the year. Japan and the others probably, I think, if I recall right, Japan has already pivoted or stuff like that. I think I don't recall that clearly now, but the general indication is that most of the advanced markets will begin to pivot sometime late in the second half of the year. And once that happens, it starts to shift sentiment back to emerging market, and we may stand to benefit. Hopefully, the Eurobond restructuring also gets completed then, because currently we are in default and no one will look at us. But if we restructure and take ourselves out of that default categorization, then you can begin to attract offshore sentiment into the local economy. And that is where the correction will begin or will strengthen going forward. So those are a few of the global highlights that I think will have implications for us locally.
Oh, that's interesting. So I'm hearing about peace. Peace is not just good for general livelihood, but peace is also good for our economy. So these external things, there's not much we sitting in Ghana can do about it. At least what we can do is our prayer warriors like Edem and Mimi can lead prayers to make sure that peace is restored in those areas. And then the interest rates too can fall, so that will become relatively more attractive and money will flow to us again. Okay, all right. So now we're getting to thinking of things that we actually can control, thinking about the impact on our personal finances. What do you suggest from an education point of view first? What do you suggest that the average Ghanaian should start educating themselves about when it comes to FX rates and the general economy?
Well, this is a difficult one. In fact, to be honest, I think that our reaction to what expected rate of depreciation will be ultimately hurts all of us. I mean, the speculation. And this is why I say so. You see, if by our actions, our speculations would drive exchange rate to $15, $16 cedis to $1, yes, you may have saved a few dollars in your bank account, in your room, wherever it is. But you see, you will face the higher prices, which is a consequence of depreciation. And what we know is that pricing in Ghana, you are not paying for only the good you bought, or the costs the importer or whoever produced it incurred, plus their profit margin, but you are also paying for replenishing that stock. So if someone is selling you a laptop, maybe he bought that laptop at $1,000. Exchange rate impact means that maybe its value in CDs maybe 12,000, 13,000 cedis. But when he is selling it to you today, he'll be thinking of what exchange rate to be maybe in 2-3 months' time when he's going to import the same laptop. And he wants to make up for any such potential loss. So instead of 12, 13,000, which the price should be based on his cost, you may be facing 15, 16,000. So the savings you make on, or the returns you are making on your dollar investments due to the speculations and all that will ultimately come back to pay for the higher price. And it turns out to be mostly a zero-sum game, or in some instances, you even pay more than the return you made. So I think that as a people, yes, I want it's within everyone's right to purchase some FX if you so desire, but let's do so when we have need for it, when we have some obligation in FX to face maybe in a few months or a year time that you need saving for. And I say this reluctantly because personally I also purchase FX for my own shaggy agenda. But then I'm trying to say that it ultimately comes back to hurt us in ways we never thought, right? So let's be measured in how we go about it. And I think the conversation around it, what you hear on the media space is mostly sensational. And today in the social media arena, the conversations are almost endless and mostly uninformed. And you see someone somewhere who has no intention of purchasing FX and won't contribute to the speculation, read or see some of these in quote, not so informed conversations and try to, it's driven into a frenzy to also go contribute to it. So your actions, your inactions indirectly contribute to the speculation and the pressure we all face. So I think it's difficult, and we must be citizens, but at least let's be measured in the kind of commentary we run around some of these things, because it could feel a little over and above where it should be, and we are the ultimate bearers of the consequence of those actions. In terms of investment, if you are doing T-bill, if you are doing any CD denominated investment today, yes, T-bill rate is 25%, 91. At the upper end, it's about 27%. It looks attractive. But what is the rate of inflation? It was also 25%, maybe now 23.1. So your inflation adjusted return is almost insignificant. But if you have the opportunity to do some maybe dollar investment, I don't mean buy dollars, but I mean invest in. Today there is Nvidia stock that is surging, like getting so much. There is Google. Those are probably a no-go area for a lot of people who do not have the heart. But if you have an understanding, you have the heart. There are even local products on our market that are exposed to some of these foreign stocks, foreign bonds and all that can preserve value for you. They may be denominated in Cedi, but the exchange rate effect also impacts the returns. So somehow you are preserving your investment. If we have options like that, please exploit. It could be of value. But then while doing it, just keep watching, because if there is a correction, it will affect the returns also. So you know when to go in, when to exit and all that. I think those are the bits I can say about as an investor or some market watchers, interested parties, the things we can do and not do. But of course, I think there are investment gurus on the page. And what I'm saying is from a research perspective. I see Mimi, I see Elikem, yourself, and that. You can advise us on what we can all do, and we are all happy to listen. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we'll jump in, but we want to hear it's good we've had the economic foundation behind all these things. I like your honesty about, even though you are saying one thing, you declared your conflicts.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I have a conflict there, a big one.
That's good. That's good. You know, a man of integrity. I want to respect you. Okay, so I like what you said. It's really good perspective. But Harry, I just want to give some pushback, because the last time you were here talking about the Cedi, I remember that day it was around this time last year, I think, because I think it was around this time last year because I was traveling somewhere, or it was in January. But what we talked about, you explained the same thing about us as individuals, our role to play in the markets, and if we fuel speculation by certain activities. But we got some comments. We got some really hard pushback. So I want to run them by you and see what your follow-up would be. People are saying that we as individuals, the transactions we do, it's not much. Is it some $1,000, some $2,000 that we'll go and buy? Whereas the government is doing very big transactions. Larger companies are doing way bigger transactions. That's what we should focus on. And allow the small people, as one Nigerian politician said, let the poor breathe. You understand? What do you have to say about that?
Alekem, if you, as an individual, manage to save a $30,000-$40,000, it may not be over a year, a month or two, but probably over a year. And just count the number of other people that may be doing same. They say mighty drops of ocean, and water makes a mighty ocean. So add all of those things together all across Ghana, and you can get a sense of what may be happening on that side. But of course, the point about the heavy hitters is also equally important. But you see, who are the people on the corporate side that demand FX, and what do they do with it? They are the importers. They are the multinationals who need to repatriate their dividends anyway, right? Will you put quantitative controls in place? That is not competitive, because when you practice an open economy, you want to have free flow of capital and resources, right? So that people feel free to come in. The whole FDI strategy, getting foreign companies to come, or people with business ideas to come and establish in Ghana, create employment, and all that, is because you are telling them that my space is free. I am politically stable. I have a thriving economy, and you can make money and move in and out at any time. Where you begin to put quantitative controls, you limit how much FDI can flow in, and by extension, how much jobs it can create locally. And remember, government cannot create it all. And when corporates are importing, they're importing the goods and services we all need, right, for our collective survival. So there is only so much limit you can put on those sides, right? And so the bit I'm talking about is, and I call it effective demand. I'm not saying let no one buy dollars. That is not what I'm saying. There is frivolous demand, which is you just gaming to make a return. And there is effective demand, where you are demanding towards an obligation. If your demand is effective, by all means do it. And that is what I think I'm doing. I have an obligation, I have an aspiration, which I'm trying to fund. So I am trying to build up some buffers towards that. But if you are gaming the system, so if you like taking a punt on the Cedi for your gains, not because of some obligation somewhere, that is what I think we are all speaking against. And don't trivialize the volumes. You may be doing 1,000 Cedi, someone may be doing $1,000, someone may be doing $500. But if you aggregate it across 30 million people in Ghana, that can be substantive, right? And I don't have figures to it. Bank of Ghana will probably have, or may have, an estimate, but it is substantial. And it is not only individuals that speculate, corporates also do speculate. And you see some corporates, instead of probably buying T-bills or doing some other investment as a way of managing their cash flows, they are buying dollars. It may not be an FX obligation they have. It may just be another opportunity to invest. And they are making good returns out of that, right? So all these things are happening. And all these are what I'm speaking about. So on the individual level, on the corporate level, let's do some self-searching. If it is not an effective demand, but it is what we qualify as frivolous, we may want to look at it again, because the impact can hurt all of us.
Okay, thank you for that. We can hear that you have a junior economist assisting you over there, trying to make sure that her voice is also heard. Please tell her that we hear her. We value her inputs. We value her inputs, and we look forward to her joining us on Money Convos. Maybe you should tell us the economics of crayons and ice cream one of these days. Okay, that's the but I think my key takeaway from what you just said is that it's really separating the the effective demand from the frivolous demand, right? So if you have real need, like you are going, you know that you plan to go and visit the US on tourism, or you plan to go to Dubai, or you plan to go somewhere, it just makes sense that you would save some money in dollars so that when you travel, you will spend that money. It does make sense compared to the people who are just buying it to keep it under their pillows or to keep it in a bank account for return or for out of fear. So I think that's a good point, and we should not despise or underestimate the little drops of water that will make a mighty ocean. That's great. Courage, thank you very much. You mentioned the investments that people can take on the stocks and all that. So for that, I would encourage everyone to get on Instagram, look up at investment_friend. You know, our investment friend is there to help us with making decisions after gathering all the information that we gather here at Money Convos. You need someone to help you make your decision, someone who consider your individual situation to see whether Nvidia stock is good for you or not. Again, this is what we are saying here on this podcast right now is not investment advice, but we are telling you if such a thing exists and it will suit your interest, look it up. And a good avenue to go to assess that is investment friend. So on Instagram at investment_friend. In April, when you go through the post on investment friend, in April we had some posts about investing in stocks, and some of them we also talked about investing in foreign stocks. There's a really funny post or video that we have discussing the big 7 stocks in the US and the Magnificent Seven. That's the right term, Magnificent Seven, and their performance. Somebody made a really funny skit out of it, so it's really good. You could go check it out. Just go down to where the April content is at, and you would get all that information. And of course, DM investment friend if you have any questions, engage, join the community, and it will help you. And of course, here too on Monday Convos, do follow us on X if you are not already following us. Subscribe on YouTube so that you can play back, you can tell your friends about it. Let's all grow strong. Don't just follow and keep the information to yourself. Spread the word. Just today, in fact, this week, some people have said, can you have a podcast and you have not been telling me about it? Why are you keeping the information to yourself? So just before I joined this, I shared it with somebody because sometimes I don't want to put things down people's throats, but I bring it up in conversation every time. But I think people are hungry for this information. Let's not hoard it. Share the link. Tell people about it. Look up Money Convos wherever you listen to podcasts. On Instagram, you find us there. Facebook, you find us there. Here on X too, you find us. And thank you to everyone who joined in. I see Dr. Paulina Crunchy in the audience. Shout out to Paulina. Please, as you go on in your work, talking to people everywhere, spread some of this information that you've gained. I know you do a good job of that. And to Courage, any final words for us? I know that on these matters, Edem will say he's being silent and learning. So, Courage, do you have any final words for us on the state of the Cedi? Oh, sorry, Courage, if you are muted, you can unmute and speak.
All right, sure. My final words will be that I expect as the year wears on that there will be some correction, and I think gradually we are approaching. It looks like the worst is behind us, and we can look forward into once the election is over. We can look forward from 2025 going with some optimism that we would have built some foundation on which to stand and continue building, and the kind of volatilities we are seeing probably will be subdued a bit. And so that is maybe an area of optimism. So don't make your decisions thinking that if we saw maybe 20 plus depreciation last year, 20 plus this year already, it may mean that the next few years it will be same. There is room for some correction along the way. And I think we all need to play our part. I think this is an important forum to share perspectives, inform perspectives, and then we can understand how to cope. And I think the conversation should keep going. And of course, let's invest. Let's build the future together for ourselves. And let's look at investing in Ghana as well, because that is what will create the jobs. That's what will create the income, the wealth that would also help us grow as a nation. On that score, I just want to say thank you again, Alikem, for the opportunity and a big congratulations. Yeah. Not very long ago, 61 Barnes Road was a haven today you are walking into a new destiny. Yeah. So congratulations on that. It's been a tough road, but I think you've killed it. You've nailed it. And knowing you, I know you make all of us proud there. So yeah, I wish you all the best in that new chapter as you look forward to starting. Yeah.
Thank you, Courage. Thank you for the kind words. Yes, we've come a long way from 61 Barnes Avenue. All right, great. Thank you, Courage, also for explaining everything to us, enlightening us, and always being available whenever we call on you. We wish you a good night and a good rest of the week. And to everyone, wish you same. We hope to catch you all same time next week. We'll have another interesting, informative conversation for us. So I think, Dennis, just respond with a reaction if I'm correct. I think next week we are talking about whether investments should be exciting or boring. Some people like to hear some excitement. They always want the hottest thing, the newest thing. So we want to see the good old boring things where you just put your money in and you leave it away is what will make you wealthy, or is the hot things that will make you wealthy. Always looking for the hot tip. So we're going to get into that next week. All right then. Okay, catch you next week. It's going to be a fun conversation. Don't miss out. Do take care. Bye.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to our thoughts. I hope you learned a thing or two and start practicing. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Clubhouse, and Facebook. And subscribe to our YouTube and podcast. Do tell a friend about Money Convos so we all become wealthy together. Talk to you soon. Bye.